to Mike Westhoff, the former Jets special team coach for a long time, and, of course, an analyst on Jets Postgame Live right here on SNY. Mike, we appreciate a couple of minutes, and you certainly spent time around Mark Sanchez, so let's start there. Tell me about your impressions of him and kind of how his career unfolded here for the Jets as it ends in disappointing fashion for him, I'm sure.
It was certainly myriad. It had so many different directions that it went. Mark, when Mark, took over as quarterback for us, he was really a part of a very good, solid, well-rounded football team. Not a great football team, but a good, rounded football team. We were good at, we led the league in rushing. We had a veteran offensive line. We had some good receivers that were very dependable. We were in the top 5 in defense, and we were in the top 5 in special teams. And Mark was a part of that package. And then as time went on, those things began to dissipate. So sometimes, Mark got a lot of the blame for it, where really so many things were around him had really began to deteriorate, and it certainly was not all Mark's fault, just like it was not all his doing when we had success.
Mike, can you pinpoint where it really started to go the other direction for him? Was it, in fact, not having the same kind of personnel around him as before? And how much of it was maybe some of the pressure that he started to feel after his early achievements? Obviously,
the position, which is really the most difficult position in sports. The NFL quarterback is really the toughest job in professional sports, in my opinion, because there's so much pressure on you, and everybody's trying to get to you. And what happened with Mark, I think, is really, I know he put a lot of pressure on himself, but more than that, in my opinion, it's what deteriorated around him. The receiving core wasn't as good. We didn't, our running game wasn't as good. Our defense deteriorated. Special teams, we weren't quite as good in field position and things. So there were lots of problems that took place. Unfortunately, so many of them were just pinpointed at Mark. But in my opinion, just as he did not deserve the credit for getting us there, he certainly does not deserve the blame for when things began to deteriorate.
Well, when things did deteriorate, did the Jets then make a mistake by not having, or by having put a little bit too much maybe on him, given the team's early accomplishments in his career, and not putting the importance on having the guys around him like before?
It's a good question. I think the fact that what happened is that we began to take a look at, and you said that, when we signed into that extension contract, we said, okay, here's a quarterback that took us to 2 AFC championship games, and this is a price tag that goes with that. I think the mistake is believing that he took us there. In my opinion, he was just on the bus. He wasn't even driving it. That's how I feel. He was a part of a good team. So consequently, I think too much emphasis was put on, well, let's get Mark the weapons that he needs, rather than the fact that this whole football team began to disintegrate. In some ways, we were a little bit different because we weren't the Super Bowl champs, obviously, but we reminded me in some ways a little bit of the Seattle Seahawks this year. We were a good football team. That's what we were. And we weren't a great team, but we were a good team. And I think way too much emphasis was given to Mark and blame put on him. I don't think there's any question to that.
All right, Mike, let's flip to the other side. Michael Vick, your reaction to him joining this team?
I'm not surprised. Don't forget, a couple years ago, Michael Vick, when he teamed up with Marty Morningway, was one of his most successful debuts. Beginning of the year before Mike got hurt, he was really red hot. And so I think with that in mind, that combination and that association, the knowing the same system, the fact that he's going back with Marty Morningweg, and he knows him so well, and he's very comfortable in what he did, and he had a particular level of success, then I think that lends itself to, hey, this guy will be a good guy to bring in and compete with Geno, and to have, whether he's a backup or whatever happens, you've got to look at those two guys, Morningweg and Michael Vick, the success that they had at one time before Michael Vick got hurt. Michael Vick was red hot at that time, so I think that had a great deal to do with why they made this decision. And plus, I think the fact that with Mark, the contract, and you just can't absorb that contract, and they had to make some moves there. So part of that's meeting the budget.
Okay, one more before we let you go, Mike. I'm going to throw, I guess, a semi-hypothetical at you. How tricky of a situation does this become when they clearly want Geno Smith to be the starter, but you bring in a guy of the caliber of Michael Vick? We know what he can do. You just detailed certainly what he's capable of with this offense. When you might have a spot where, let's say, Geno has a bad game, and you start to hear that maybe the Jets are going to consider going the other way with Michael Vick. Does that put Geno Smith in a bad situation as opposed to bringing in a guy that might strictly be a backup?
It should not. It better not. Don't forget, Geno Smith has a lot of development. I really liked a lot of things that I saw. But, I mean, he had the world record for turnovers. So, please, there's a lot of development that has to have with Geno Smith. I think this competition should make him a better quarterback. I'm hoping that better quarterback is the quarterback for the New York Jets. That's what I'm hoping to see. If it doesn't transpire that way, then I think there's a problem with that quarterback.
Mike, outstanding analysis. We appreciate a couple of minutes.
Okay. All right. Good seeing you. See you pretty soon.